Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Today, I have the pleasure of bringing on the author and researcher, Thomas Sheridan. He is known for his fearless exploration of human psychology and society's darker corners. Thomas has captivated audiences worldwide with his profound insights into the mechanisms behind psychopathy and manipulation. Today, we'll be talking about his groundbreaking book, Labyrinth of the Psychopath, which delves deeply into the twisted pathways of psychopathic behaviors, unveiling the disturbing reality behind those who navigate society with ruthless cunning and emotional detachment. Before we introduce him, I will introduce all the other occult rejects. Lisa, what is going on? The occult reject mad scientist.
How's it going? Good to be here. I'm very excited to hear about Thomas Sheridan's work, especially some of the psychopath stuff. So thank you, all the occult rejects, for inviting me, and I look forward to a very, very, very great in-depth discussion. And if you would like to check out more of the work that Occult Research members contribute, to check out occultresearchinstitute.org. Thank you.
Awesome. No, thank you very much. And we also got the megalith man himself, the man of weird science. We got Ricardo joining us today. Please, Ricardo, let everybody know what's up with you and your deal.
Good evening. So thank you very much for having me once more. My name is Ricardo Calvario. I'm a multidisciplinary researcher. I work intimately with the Institute for Natural Philosophy that you can find at institutefornaturalphilosophy.org. And you can find me in my X page that, as it is on the screen, is Ricardo Calvary1 at X, and you'll find all the links to connect to my work in there. So thank you very much, and good evening to everyone on the panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Ricardo. And today we got a friend of the show joining us today. We got Jules from Greypilled podcast. I'm always trying to bug this guy to come on, and we finally made it happen again. So thank you, Jules. It's always a pleasure to have you joining us, man. So
yeah, man. No,
what the deal is.
It's always a pleasure to come on, man. Thank you for having me. It's always good to meet new people. We always have good conversations on this show. Yeah, guys, I'm the host of Greypilled, but I also do I'm the co-host of Sound Science, Elohim Etymology, and Sunday Chaos. I also have you can find me on Patreon. I do my esoteric book reviews on there. We're currently doing a watch party, watching season 1 of Twin Peaks. A lot of cool stuff over there. On Twitter at Greypilled Pod, Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. So yeah, Nick, thank you for having me on.
No, of course. Thank you for joining us. And we got Ethan Indigo with us today. Please, Ethan, let everybody know what your deal is.
Peace. Honored to be here with everyone. I'm excited to get some lessons from Thomas and learn about his experiences and ideas. And I'm a writer also on the Esoteric and Exoteric, recent article on Occult Research Institute. And I'm on all the usual social media, so appreciate connection and communication. Thanks, you guys.
Of course. Always love having you joining us, Ethan. And last but not least, before we get to the guest, we got JJ Vance, not the vice president. What's going on today, sir?
Hey, greetings, sir. I appreciate the invite as always. And fellow occult rejects, always great to join y'all. And Thomas, great to meet you, sir. JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, and more notably, not the vice president. Operation GCD live Wednesdays, Fridays with Nick, the occult rejects. We host a Friday show there, and Sundays, Operation GCD Patreon, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and starting tonight with the legends or the tales of my curse of Robert the Doll, the demonic little being that's been plaguing me for the last almost 13 years. So, looking forward to the conversation. Always a good time here at the Occult Rejects.
Thank you very much, JJ. And finally, to the man himself, the guest, Thomas Sheridan. Please, sir, let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find all your amazing work.
Well, my sphere of contact is diminishing greatly of late, but the best place to find me would be on Substack, Thomas Sheridan. You'll find me there. I love Substack. I love reading it and writing on it, and it's a true free speech platform. The YouTube channels are there, and I'm on Telegram. So my YouTube channels is Thomas Sheridan 2, and beyond room 313. And that's basically where I am now. And yeah, so I'm, you know, there's a lot of stuff. I put a lot of stuff out over the last 14 or so years. And so there's a, you know, if you want to go digging, you'll probably be digging forever. I really need like an archivist or something who can compile it all, but you know, it'll probably happen when I'm dead or something.
Well, I will have to say a really big shout out to Zeralath. I really appreciate my man's help. He hooked me up with you on Instagram, then you lost your Instagram, then he hooked me up with you on your Twitter, then you lost your Twitter. I had to go looking for your email just to make sure I got you on the show today. I was like, yo, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah, it became comical at one point. But anyway, here we are. We made it.
Yes, yes. Please, if you can, let the people know, besides the book that we're talking about, Labyrinth of the Psychopath, let people know like some of the other work you've done, because I mean you kind of done all areas of stuff, if you don't mind. You know, if you want to put
I was a kind of a, you know, I was kind of like a very inquisitive child, and I grew up in a tough area and neighborhood on the north side of Dublin in Ireland, and I was very interested from an extremely early age. I'm talking about like 8, 9 in the occult, and I was reading Dennis Wheatley novels, and I read Conway's book on the occult primer, the magical primer, when I was about 10, and I did one of the workings in it, and it happened. It worked. It actually came to pass, and I became very frightened because I didn't. You know, it was like, you know, it's one of those things you do as a kid that you don't think it's going to happen, and it happens, and you suddenly get frightened by it. So I stayed away from that for a little while, but it's still very interesting. And I used to have a bicycle, and I used to cycle outside the city and go visit ancient sites. And I had found a fascination with things like round towers and megaliths and stuff like that. On top of all that, trying to go through school, the normal day-to-day things, and playing music. I was in a couple of bands and that kind of thing. So I was basically typical of my generation. I was born in the mid-late 60s. So I was like, you know, it was a very good time to be a young person. Even in Ireland in the 1980s, there was tremendous opportunities to do every kind of thing you wanted in terms of exploring your mind and stuff. And so that led to one thing. And so I'm very interested in the occult, very much so. Very interested in things, the American writer H.P. Lovecraft, and that a deep study, long-term study of that. I've made a documentary about him, and been to New England many, many times and visited those locations, and it's almost like he's an obsession for me. Yeah, I'm interested in the crossover period between when Christianity ended and when paganism ended and when Christianity began, and that mysterious part of history, that gray area. I wrote a book about it called The Druid Code. I've written books about the Round Towers of Ireland. I've written a book on the occult called Sorcery. I wrote 2 books on psychopathy and 1 on mind control. And that's basically it. So, yeah, I know it sounds kind of diverse, but even the psychopathic thing, that came out of an occult kind of thing as well. You know, it does tie in. There is a spirit, I would say, well, a spiritual dimension to that is very powerful. And I wanted to be the first person to address that outside the Abrahamic framework of, I'm a Christian and they're all evil. I didn't want to go, I'm not a Christian, I'm a pagan. I'm actually an Indo-European pagan. So that's where puzzling people came from. Now, the book is 14 years old now, something like that, 12 years old. And it still sells fairly well. I still get my royalty checks from the publishers, and they, I'm surprised that it's like, it's enough to pay a few bills and, some extra beer money, that kind of thing. And I know I've kept the publisher happy. I'm on the same publisher. So I thought when the book came out, I thought like, yeah, I get a bit of a blast from it. I think it sold nearly 200,000 copies at this point. And it was tremendously successful. And, this is over 12 years now. So it sounds good. If I got that in 1 year, I'd be like, I wouldn't be living here. I'd be like, doing really well. But, it's spread over that whole period. It always sounds amazing. And then you realize, it's about the same amount of money I'd make if I was working in a supermarket part-time, But anyway, I was delighted with the success of it. I'm delighted that it reached so many people and helped so many people. How it came about was I was working as a graphic designer and corporate communications guy in Goldman Sachs on Wall Street. This would be mid-80s. I wasn't a money guy. I was a communications and marketing kind of guy. And I very, very much liked the job and liked the people there. But there were certain individuals there who did work in the international financing thing that there was something not right with them. Now, I couldn't quite put the finger on it. They were very glib, very vacuous. They didn't really have the sense of humor I had. And when they tried to impress me, they knew I had a kind of surrealist sense of humor, which I do, very much so. That's part of the sort of chaos magic world, Discordia. I was like, that came out of. So, I found that you can always tell a person by your sense, how to react to your sense of humor. It's a tremendous occultic tool. So these people would try to impress me with things. And I was like, you really don't understand me at all, do you? It was almost like they saw me as a pastiche of a stereotype or something of what they wanted me to be. But I also saw how cold and aggressive they could be and manipulative, particularly around, people that they were using. So just, the gods were in alignment at the time. And I was reading books about serial killers. I took an interest in serial killers around that time because I had a friend who used to live next door to John List. He was a serial killer that was in New Jersey that had actually ran away, and America's Most Wanted had made a reconstruction of his face and how he'd looked all these decades later, and they actually nabbed him. And this guy had worked with Tommy. John List was a serial killer, but he was also the bogeyman in the town that we lived in. So it became kind of interesting, this kind of thing, occultic, like the Jack the Ripper kind of thing. There's a spiritual as well as a kind of a crime element to it. So I was reading books about like Ted Bundy and David Yallop's Delivers from Evil, which was about the Yorkshire Ripper in England, and which he correctly identified that there was somebody helping him that was almost certainly a celebrity or someone famous because the government and police were protecting him. That turned out later to be Jimmy Savile, the famous notorious pedophile and sex freak from the BBC. So I was reading this stuff at the time, and I was reading the profiling of serial killers by criminal psychologists and stuff like that. And I'm reading the profile, and I'm looking at this fucker that I'm working with, and I'm looking at the profile, and I'm going, that's him. That's him. That's exactly him, except he doesn't kill. He doesn't, the glibness, the superficiality, the manipulation, the dead-eyed stare. When he'd ask me for something and I didn't have it, the eyes inflaming, like going like this, and and then me suddenly, no, don't worry about it, we'll get it sorted. And they go, great, let's go and get drunk, and not feeling completely comfortable around him, that kind of a thing. Like you knew you'd never want to like be mates with him, really, that kind of a thing. And so then I started, there was almost nothing. This was mid-90s. There was like the books like People of the Lie, and it was Harvey Cleckley's books on psychopathy, but they were not right. And then later on, Robert Hare came out from the University of British Columbia and was his checklist that actually gave you an insight into them. And his work was amazing because he referred to them as intraspecies predators, and I was like, that's it. There's something unhuman about them. And then that started me on a huge just interest, just like for myself, like nerdy, geeky, interest in this stuff. And I was reading, I was like, holy shit, I wish I knew this when I was leaving school. I wish I knew this when I was 22. I wish I knew this when I was 14. This explains that guy. This explains her. This explains this person. How come I don't know this valuable information that would have made my life significantly less difficult when I was trying to make my way through life as a young lad coming into adulthood? And I would have realized right away what I was dealing with and how to deal with them. Well, that they weren't people who could actually reach or communicate with or, change or anything like that. And so I started making videos about 14, 15 years ago on YouTube, and YouTube first came out in the back room there on my laptop called Labyrinth of the Psychopath. And I started just as a kind of, again, a nerdy, geeky, thing to share. Well, they blew up. They suddenly got loads of hits. And then the publisher of the book, Puzzling People, saw the videos and said, "You got to write a book on this, and we got to put it out for you." And so that's how that came about. That's how that came about. Now, and so it was good in one ways because okay, it got me a name out there, so I was able to deliver my other work. You know, it gave me a profile, and I went on shows like, you know, Red Ice. Do you remember when Red Ice was really big back then? And I got a huge amount, and I was invited to do conferences in Britain and stuff like that, and so it steamrolled from that point out. But it was always amazing how people always had the same, you know, Thomas, you nailed those that my ex-husband perfectly. You nailed my ex-boss. You nailed the neighbor next door perfectly. And I says, no, we've always known this. And then I almost had a conspiratorial aspect to it, that they were deliberately keeping it from us. I think that was true. I think people would have seen through the likes of Bill Gates and Fauci and a lot of those kind of, a lot easier and quicker. And people like that, and Tony Blair in particular. Now, that caused me problems because in 2012, I did a conference in England. And it was with, do you remember what was his name? The guy who wrote the book, Confessions of the Wall Street Guy, Confession of an Economic Hitman. I was on tour with him. I forget his name. And there was a big audience in a high-profile place in central London that was being broadcast. And I said that Tony Blair shows all the classic, you know, makings of a psychopath. He has them all. And I was tailed. I was by MI5. I was, you know, had all kinds of spooks from cults sent after me and everything. And then it was a tremendous education because I realized how the world really worked and this kind of thing. And so that was the dark side of it, but that eventually went down. But yeah, it's a very interesting subject, and it's something. Now, I've kind of not haven't shunned it in the last decade, but I kind of put it to one side. But as from the COVID on, the whole COVID experience back on, and seeing the behavior of politicians and bureaucrats and civil servants and how they were salivating, locking us down and all this stuff and smirks on their faces, it started to ferment again into my conscience. So I started revisiting this work. So that's basically the story of how I came up with that and how that developed purely by accident, purely as an interest that was trying to help myself. But I mean, I get still to this day, I still get lots of emails from people all over the world saying you saved my life. And people come up in the street all the time, where I go in the world, like, you know, and it's like, it's remarkable, you know, it's like this. I mean, people often say to me, you popularized the term gaslighting because no one was using it until it was very rare and very hidden. And it says you started popularizing it on the internet, and suddenly it shows up on TV shows and all. And I was being contacted by Hollywood people and stuff like that in the early days, but I never answered them or never had anything to do with them or anything. But so it wheedled its way into the zeitgeist, you know. And now everyone uses the term, even like Trump, and everyone uses the term gaslighting. And so I think I did have a kind of a soft impact on Western culture. Not in any kind of great spectacular way. I wasn't particularly original, but I think I have a good kind of, because I'm just a regular fella, you know, just a regular Irish lad. I'm not like anything special. And I think that like appealed to a lot of people to hear it from someone like me rather than some snooty academic. And I think it did reach people.
Did anybody have any questions?
I would like
do.
to go on, Lisa. Please do. Please do.
So just really quickly, you mentioned Lovecraftian, that jarred open, you know, some of his characters that were, you know, had some spiritual corruption to their themes. But you, in some of the interviews that I've watched, and I've briefly read your Puzzling People book, you mentioned psychological conditions and how they intersect with almost like a spiritual contagion, like a virus of the soul, something that kind of infiltrates and then thrives on chaos, infiltrates and thrives on chaos and erodes empathy. Would you say that psychopathy has transcended more of a matter of survival to now spiritual discernment?
Absolutely. In fact, that's what the book was really about in many ways, because anyone who's been through that experience, I've only known male psychopaths. I've never been in a relationship with a female one. So I don't know that element. That only gone what other people told me in a relationship kind of thing. But the damage to some of these people is, it's I can only describe it as soul rape. It's quite shocking. And they talk about the physical changes in their bodies and everything, and these weird dreams they have and all this kind of thing. And yeah, absolutely, 100%, you're right about that. And another aspect of it too was that I felt lots of weird things went on when I was working on the books, and late at night there'd be like things would fall off shelves and stuff like that, and all kinds of things would happen. And it brought some very peculiar people into my life that I'm still trying to like come to terms with. I was absolutely, there is a spiritual dimension. Well, everything is when you think about it, when you really get down to it. But that absolutely is. And you could sit, I remember, I can remember there was an event I did in London, and it was a guy who was like a Harley Street psychiatrist. And this was a guy who was like, one of the top guys in like Britain in terms of as a psychiatrist. And he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Thomas, read the book, very interesting." And I was going, and he introduced himself. Yeah, doctor, whatever, blah blah blah. I practice down on Harley Street, and I'm going, oh no, he's going to start slagging me off. And he goes, "You're right, they're demons." That's all he said. There you go. That came from Harley Street.
I enjoyed hearing about your background there, Thomas, of your writing your book there and identifying psychopaths. And you make a very important note, I think, there, as far as no one really teaches us how to identify these psychopaths, right? You were saying that had you known how to identify these folks, you'd have been better well equipped in which to understand what you're dealing with in the circumstances and environment. And I think that's a good point. As far as I'm concerned, you could. Identifying a psychopath should be taught to kindergartners in a book next to what is a cow and what is a lamb, and what does a cow say moo and what does a psychopath say? You just insert anything from Henry Kissinger, right? Any quote?
Yeah, exactly. So. It's a very funny one too, because it's a very peculiar thing too, because this another thing too is there was all these kind of psychopath, what they call psychopath recovery groups, from people being in relationships, and it was full of people who literally saw psychopaths everywhere, and that's completely wrong and unhealthy as well. If somebody dumped him, he's a psychopath. If somebody pissed him off, she's a psychopath. This became a kind of, for a while there around the 2013s, there was a lot of kind of hysteria around it then that come out. And thankfully that's stopped now, and it's come back to a more balanced thing. But the thing is that like everybody has done something in their lives that could be bad. We all have a lot of those things we've done, and the people come up and say, "Thomas, I think I'm a psychopath." And well, what makes you think that? And he goes, "Well, I got into a fight in a pub, and I went to prison, and I beat a guy up." And okay, what makes you think you're a psychopath? Well, because I beat a guy up and when I was drunk. And I says, "Dude, how do you feel about it now?" And he goes, "Oh, every day of my life I'm full of shame about it." And I says, "Well, I can tell you're not a psychopath. If you were a psychopath, you wouldn't give a shit, and you would be telling me that the guy deserved that, and you were defending yourself. You would never admit any culpability or any kind of flaws in your personality. This kind of thing."
Right.
So a lot of people that would get paranoid. They watch films and get paranoid, or watch documentaries and get paranoid. No, they're different in the brain. You put them under an fMRI scan, and it's quite frightening actually. And they would show normal people, say an image of a sunset and an image of a kitten, and then the next scene, a murder, someone having a throat cut like in the Middle East, and the frontal cortex of a normal brain goes absolutely bonkers because you're in shock by what you just saw. Well, the psychopath, seeing a picture of a kitten and seeing a picture of someone being beheaded, there's no difference. It don't change. The brain activity in the frontal cortex doesn't change. So it's just like information. So there's no emotional thing.
So Thomas, if I may, I was going to start from another point, but this is the one that you're mentioning is as good as any other. So let's take in consideration stoicism, right? So you don't necessarily need to be a psychopath. You might as well be a illuminated guy and react the same way to a kitten or someone being strangled. Okay, but I understand your point. I'm just saying that there might be other ways to identify people besides their emotions. Although the MRI is quite clear. I've seen that, and it's
Yeah.
quite clear. Now, in terms of the rest, I have two questions that might take a week to answer. But and one point is, when we now analyze children, we see that they are completely manipulative, especially in today when parents are taking the ability to correct them in public or this or that. So, and they use that manipulation to control the adults. And perhaps there is some click that during the evolution, they cannot disconnect from that way of manipulating others in order to want what they have or what they want. Right. So I'm just trying to see if there is a step over there that can be analyzed. And as a final point, in terms of what you were describing, to me, from my research, I would fit there perfectly, and not exclusively, but perfectly in, for instance, the teachings of the House of Khepera, that I'm not sure if you heard. So this is a class of vampires that teach not to hinder other people, but to use them. So the highest levels have these around them that allow this extraction of energy, that they have these terrible dreams, they have this emotions, but they volunteer themselves to that person. But those that are circling around us on the world, they use this ability to suck energy from others. And this happens sometimes between husband and wife and whatever, because some people don't know that have that ability, and they drain the other people. So it's people that we are next to them, and people felt completely drained or exhausted without a reason, or tired or whatever. So I know this is kind of complex. I just wanted to see how you would encompass this in your research.
Yeah, that's good stuff. The first one about children. Well, children learn to be manipulated. All children learn to be manipulated from the time they're babies. They know if they cry, they'll get attention or they'll get mother's milk. So it's a kind of a learned biological thing. It's completely normal. There was some very disturbing, but work done, very good work in Florida, done about 15 years ago, where they identified children that had psychopathic traits. And they, within a group of other kids, and they moved them out, and they were all the same. It wasn't just manipulative. Many of them were into killing animals. Now, I'm not talking about like getting a bug and that kind of. I'm talking about making plans to kill the animals, like trapping frogs and then smashing them with a hammer, and then seeing if they could smash 20 frogs, 25 frogs the next day, and 30 frogs the day after that, and then creating complex traps to do it. This was something, a normal kid might kill a frog by kicking it or something, but that's kind of a stupid impulse that young kids do. This would be they would sit down and plan it, that kind of a thing. And they would be excited by it. They would receive a rush, sort of an adrenaline rush.
It's beyond fear, right? Because the other aggression is in terms of fear of the unknown. They kill the animal as a mixture of fear and excitement. But what you're describing is there is no fear. There is the love for the hurting, for the killing, for the hunt and the prey.
An energy rush. That's the way they put it. That causes norepinephrine, a hormone, to light up at the back of their brainstem, and this is what causes the eyes to inflame. So if you're ever with someone, and now I knew a guy. He's dead now. He's a friend of mine. He had eyes that were like bugging as well, but it happened because he fell off a motorcycle and hit his head. But he wasn't a psychopath, but he had those eyes, and used to joke about himself having, "Oh, Thomas, I've got the psycho eyes." I said, you fucking do. You really do. But I know what happened. You fell off a motorcycle. But they could talk to them with the normal eyes, and when they want something from you and they think they're getting it, the norepinephrine, the hormones start flooding the back of their brainstem, and the eyes start widening and opening. It's an animal. It's a predator. It's an attack. It's coming for energy, like you said, psychic energy, whatever. It's coming for that. It's coming for sex. It's coming for something off you. There's a fascinating video of Ted Bundy switching between these states. When he lost his appeal, when he looked like he thought he was in the clear regarding his court case, and he just kind of almost impromptu press conference outside the courtroom, and you could literally see him in a matter of 10 minutes flipping between his two different states of charm, trying to charm people. Now, they're not charming in the sense that, look, when people say, oh, psychopaths can be very charming and charismatic. No, they're not. They're not psychopaths. They're not charming and charismatic. They're very glib and superficial. It's just that some person might turn down that initial kind of thing. This guy's a bit weird. This guy's a bit something about him. It's almost like it's flattery. It's not charm through like they're funny or they're erudite or they're that kind of thing, charismatic. It's glibness. It's flattery, very much flattery, telling you how amazing you are and all that kind of thing. You have to break down your barriers. Again, that's almost like, you hear these stories in the occult of the devil inviting you over the threshold. There's a lot of that kind of element and a psychic sense to it. Yeah, big time. Oh my God, big time. But it's not charming. Charming is different, and charisma is not the same as what they have. They have flattery and glibness and superficiality. And some people, unfortunately, who, for whatever low self-esteem, whatever, are very easily manipulated by flattery and superficial glibness. They probably were neglected as children or something, and they're very good prey for these type of personalities. The second part of it you're talking about is psychic vampirism. Yeah, absolutely. This is a real thing. I've been in the company of people where not only and like nothing bad happened, right? Like they didn't call me names or beat me up or anything like that. But I felt drained at the end of it. Even if there was no high intensity activity or like a discussion or anything. And I soon realized that these people were actually feeding off me. Now, it happened maybe once or twice in my life, but it's very common. It's a very common experience that we all have, actually. Now, are these people psychopaths? I don't know. They're you get the borderline type personality too, which is a very similar kind of thing, but they're driven by high intensity and hysteria. They love high drama. They love that kind of thing. Yeah, the psychic vampire thing is very, very true. And it's an awful thing. I've actually had to go lie down. And even some people who are actually decent people can do it just by their personality. There's one man I used to know who was into conspiracy stuff. Like myself, I am too. But he was into everything. The type of guy that thinks everything is a conspiracy, like his next door neighbors in the Illuminati, this kind of thing, those types. And he would just lay it on and lay it on and lay it on just to try and share information with me. And I honestly would be like, I'd have migraine headaches and, I'll be run down for the rest of the day.
Maybe
and
that's what I him out
he wasn't a bad guy. He was a vampire, and I had to, as soon as I got rid of him, I felt better. So, but the psychic vampirism within the psychopath is manipulative for a reason, where it's leading to something else. It's creating dependency. They're very big into creating dependency in another person. This is something you should watch out for. If your sister suddenly falls in love, or your mother or your aunt falls in love with this guy out of the blue, and he suddenly is demolishing her entire friendship network, everything, and using it to she becomes the sun, and she's all she is then is a planet orbiting him and nothing else. That's a very good indicator that you might be dealing with a psychopathic individual. That suddenly out of the blue he kind of controls her. I'll give you I remember, I've seen this firsthand growing up with someone I knew. She might be taken in by him, and you think like it's a normal relationship, but you notice subtle things. He may have shown no interest in what she was or where she came from, but he's pretending he suddenly loves, say she's Portuguese, right? And he's pretending he suddenly loves Superbock, beer, and he's into Portuguese food, and He loves, all this stuff, and that kind of thing. And another thing too is he will finish her sentences before she's finished speaking. So it's like she might be saying something like, well, and then this happened, and then when I went over to talk to this person, he'll interject and go, well, yeah, and then what happened to her was this. It's a sort of a stewardship, a pathological stewardship of the other person's, and it happens male, female, male, of the other person's consciousness, to the point where they're kind of like an automaton or a puppet of this other person who's taking control of them. That is a major red flag. Again, doesn't necessarily, it could just be a controlling asshole, it could just be a controlling asshole. But you just have to be very careful of that. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but when things like that start manifesting, you go, especially if he starts destroying her previous social network, moving her away from friends and stuff, or only having her around certain people he wants her to be with, this kind of thing that he doesn't see as a threat to her. That's the one you should look out for. In terms of the psychic.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jules.
No, are you going to say something, Lisa?
No, I was just going to say that, wouldn't you say that some of these, I would call them emotional predators, carry this mask of sanity to them, in that they're trying to mask themselves as the, model poster child of sanity.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of them don't drink or take drugs, because the mask of sanity will slip. A lot of them will not go. They won't drink unless you're wasted first and you can't remember, that kind of thing. But they generally avoid alcohol. They'll say things like, "Oh, I can't drink beer anymore because it makes me depressed." What happens is they're not drinking beer because it makes them lose control, and as you said, the mask of sanity falls off them.
Mm-hmm.
So just to make clear, I don't like alcohol, but it's because it makes me feel bad, okay? That's all.
Yeah.
Can I say there was a study?
You should some more until it makes you feel better.
There was a study on human empathy, and they actually used young people, like really young, 6 months to 2 years or so. And they used, I believe the tool was a train track with a vehicle that went up a slope. And there were 2 different vehicles, one that helped this vehicle go up the slope and one that hindered the vehicle go up the slope. And they observed the young people's reaction to this circumstance. And many of the young people would remove the hindering vehicle and would help the vehicle go up the hill. What they noticed was that if that was the indicator of empathy, the younger the person was, the more empathetic they were to the vehicle trying to go up the hill. It started to decrease the older they got. And so it just kind of, it's similar to this idea of vampirism. We're not born being vampiric. We're, influenced by societal, pushing and pulling.
Yeah, we're corrupted by culture. There's no doubt about that. But psychopaths are definitely born psychopaths. There's no doubt about that.
That's what I was going to say.
They're not kids who've gone bad. This is what came out of the mother's womb. The mothers will even tell you. I had a friend in Israel who used to work in a maternity hospital there. And she said every so often a baby was born that when it was feeding time with the mother would almost like attack the breast, like an animal. There was no pure bonding there. It was purely, give me milk from almost instantaneously out of the womb. And inevitably this child would grow up to be like extremely dysfunctional. Now
that's
empathy. It's frightening when you start getting to that level. Now empathy, you see, we're all made to believe, and I feel like I had a guy in England years ago was furious at me when he said, "Thomas, all children are born innocent." And I said, "Dude, they're not. They're not. There's lots of research to prove they're not. Yeah, some kids are, I would call them proto-psychopaths. They may have grown up in a war or in a difficult, an abusive household, and they became bad. That's what you were talking about, right? They became bad. Now we have to think of two things. Empathy is a word I don't like, and I'll tell you why. It's not the correct term. The correct term is compassion. Compassion is what we're really talking about. Empathy, when you look at the actual clinical or the actual standard model of it, that just means an understanding between people. So when a football team is playing together, a basketball team is playing together, or a group, they have an empathic understanding of one another, and that has to do with the mirror neurons in the brain tend to all fire and sync when you have a well-oiled team, or a family that's very close, or a couple that's close. Compassion is a different thing. Compassion really has no payoff for it in an evolutionary sense. I mean, like if you're in the wilds with your friend and a bear attacks or something happens and he has a limp, you stop and risk your life to try and get him away from that bear. That's compassion, because that has absolutely no biological evolutionary possibility for you. It's suicidal. So there's something very beautiful about human compassion. Whereas, the evolutionary biologists will try and tell you, oh, it's just for survival. It's just, to keep the tribe going. It's not. There's some kind of goodness that's inherent in most people that they will, sacrifice themselves for another. But even from children, they will show these traits of they're only in it for themselves. They're only in. So the word I try to tell people, empathy is a very misleading term in terms of this kind of thing. It's really compassion, because when this compassion is innate. A person is born with compassion unless they're a psychopath.
I always saw the word empathy as putting yourself in the other situation. I never looked at it as you describe it now. I've been misled all these years, because to me empathy was to feel what the other is feeling, or treat others as you want to be treated yourself. So if I'm being attacked by the bear, I would like that the other guy help me. That's why I'm going to help him, because if I was on that situation, I would want to be helped, right?
That's empathy. That's the truth. That's true empathy. You're right about that. But it's not. You're not doing it as an automatic impulse out of survival. You're being driven by the need to protect this person, and that's compassion.
Empath. Yeah.
So do you think that these children that has these traits are observed, selected, and taught to get to extremes, especially when they are also intelligent? Because there's a lot of psychopaths that are not intelligent. It's all instinct, and it works because humans in general unfortunately are not that clever. Or they have traumas, or they have this or that problem, and they are easily manipulated. But it's sad, but it's true. So do you think that there is someone or some organism that sees these promising figures, and that's how we find these people leading without any kind of empathy or compassion or in a real psychopathic fashion?
I asked a guy years ago who was a drill sergeant in the Royal Marines in England about, do you guys actually look for the psychos because they're kind of useful on the battlefield? And he goes, oh yeah, we do profile them. He says, but we don't put them in the battlefield as such, because they're completely unreliable. Because they're only in it for themselves. Again, they will not be there for the squad. They will not be there for the platoon. They will not be there. They'll be in it for themselves. And there's lots of very good information. There was a fantastic documentary on BBC years ago, and it was about soldiers who had deserted. And they showed that these soldiers who deserted, you'd often believe, before they would shoot them for desertion, they'd often have gotten away, done things about 20 or 25 times. They didn't just shoot them for the first time they did it. And it was always the same. These guys would leave the battlefield, would go rob houses, rape women, run off, steal stuff, try to sell it. They were just completely, they were everywhere except in the platoon. In the front line, they were only looking at themselves. Now, this guy I was talking to from the Royal Marines says where they are useful is if you just want a cold-blooded killer and they're really good as a sniper or something. So they identify a psychopath, and they will play upon they have a super ego. Well, and they will that remember saying about killing the frogs earlier. Well, killing the enemy, and they will if they're really good at sniping, they will give them a sniper's rifle, and tell them to make a game out of killing as many people as possible and enemies as possible. But that would be it. They wouldn't put them in a team combat role, because they know perfectly well that they're completely unreliable.
Sure. And then they are discommissioned and they get bored and decide to put the gun on a car and start shooting people on a park or something like that to get that feeling. But
yeah. Well, I think you're talking about like these mass shooters. There's something else going on with them. There's again, that's another subject. I mean, there have been serial killers who are definitely psychopaths in that sense, but there's also people who've been damaged in the military, or these kind of MK Ultra programs. We do know they're real; they do exist, and these kind of like strange, military programs to brainwash people and make Manchurians. This is a fact of life. I mean, and it's interesting that a lot of places where it goes on tend to be countries that have militaries that deal with it. They switch these guys on, that they don't know how to switch them off.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that in here, they are going to the military for those that don't pass the psychological tests, and they are putting them to work in the police. So
yeah,
they are getting these enormous guys, right? That they enjoy the violence. They enjoy it deeply to have this power over others, and that's what they're placing on strategic places among the cities. Just we don't feel safe, and it's the police, because at any moment they can snap and decide to bully you, and they lift you on the ground and they lift you on the air, because they're huge and they're 4 and 5 in packs, like wolf packs, that are choosing victims randomly because they can. It's just social chaos engineered.
Power over others. You nailed that. That's a really important aspect of this, the concept of power over others. As this is what turns them on. This is their, they're dead and empty inside. There's nothing in there. They don't dream, because whatever causes this issue in their frontal cortex prevents them from dreaming. They have no creativity. They can learn things, but there's no. It's purely what's in it for me. The University College London, about years back, about 11 years ago, had they identified to put the professions with the most psychopaths in them. And you know what was number one? Surgeons. Heart surgeons, brain surgeons. I'm not saying people that do all that work are all, but that was number one. Why? Because if you're operating on someone in that state, you have a responsibility that would drive you, me, or an average person crazy. One wrong slip and they're dead, right? But these guys don't think about that. They couldn't give a shit if they're doing a heart transplant or fixing a child's lungs or something or whatever, or brain surgery on some guy's wife. Couldn't give a shit. It's just business. It's just the job. And they're very good at that.
And the ego of the success.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the big book money is not, the big money and the God complex. Guess what? I saved 3 lives today. Who needs God? I am God. That does a huge amount. That was number one. And lawyers were number 2, and media people were number 3. So look at the world today, right? Like, let's take COVID, right? And the lockdowns and all that bullshit, right? So, medical professions, the mass media, and lawyers was really what kept us all prisoners for those years. Today, so it was like the psychopathic triad at the top. And, that's what most politicians tend to be, lawyers as well. That's usually what they come out of, the legal profession. So, it's like I ended up at this stage in my life and I'm like going, it panned out just like I learned and just, said it, not that I said it would, but I wondered if it would. Yeah, and it panned out. And, I remember when Fauci was kind of like a god in America during the beginning of the whole Rona and the whole thing. Yeah. And he was being interviewed and they were making little toys of him.
Candles.
Did you-
They had candles that they were burning to Fauci as like some kind of effigy or something. Like he kind of became this entity.
Okay,
And he-
but how is that possible?
And he believed that. And he was saying things on interviews saying like, I'm the Brad Pitt of science.
But how is that possible when he did that huge mistake with the AIDS where he killed all the patients?
Because
How is it possible? People don't have memory.
The media
Never
forgot.
happened. It never happened.
governments are full of the worst people that human beings possibly imaginable. And I don't mean like not just the United States government. The government in this country are full of some of the biggest pieces of shit you could ever even possibly encounter. And not because of psychopaths, because a lot of them are just human beings, and they're very good at hiding other people's mistakes. So yeah, Fauci got away with the AIDS because he just had to buy his time and wait for everyone to die, and he probably worked. You'll find that like behind the scenes that Fauci has destroyed numerous lives. That back in the 80s, some guy was going, this guy Fauci is full of shit with the whole AZT thing. You know, I was living in New York in the late 80s. I know lots of people that died of AIDS, and it wasn't the AIDS that killed them, it was the AZT. I know, I saw it with my own eyes. And there would have been lots of people around him in government go, this guy is up to something. Well, Fauci would have taken people to dinner, politicians, journalists, and the next thing you know, the one that was, I saw on Wall Street, the one that was wise to him was suddenly persona non grata, because he would be very manipulative. And that's how these people work. That's how they get away with it.
Well, we can never forget that it was him that managed to have 1 million to give
the federal government. Oh, go ahead, Ricardo. Cut out, I think.
Sorry. I was just saying that it was Fauci that gathered $1 million to give to Dr. Chi to take the epivirus from the north of America, from the university, to the one lab where Dr. Chi was doing the interchange into the America. And she took the virus with her with the $1 million to continue the research there, because they were not being able to put it into humans. It was not working. It was not killing humans, basically.
Business.
So yeah, but the thing is, none of this. I see this all cover up, and nothing was hidden, because this news came of National Geographic. It was a National Geographic news article that made that the Congress in the United States said epivirus are now forbidden to be developed because they cannot be controlled on the battlefield. And so the Congress vote to cancel all epivirus investigation, public epivirus investigation on the country. And that's why he tried to save his project and grabbed those $1 million, gave it to Dr. Chi, that took it then to one lab where she worked. So this was not hidden, and we don't see any of it. And people don't even believe on what in fact happened, because everyone has a theory, right? And most of them believe on the system. So my connection to this, to what we are talking, is I believe that the most dangerous of all of these psychopaths are those that are very intelligent and very well educated. Because when you combine those things,
and in positions of power like the top of bureaucracy, and there's no bureaucracy with more power than the United States government. Once you get in there, you basically own the world, because it's like, you know, it all cascades from that point down. Oh yeah, he was like, you know, he's probably one of the greatest serial killers that ever lived, you know, but he did it
taxpayer funded too, at that, right? Because he was the highest paid. No, go. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but yeah, right. Civil servant. A civil servant, you know, a civil servant.
Paid more than the president. Paid more than the president.
Yeah.
And no one asked those questions for years, right?
Yeah, and like, well, it's like, you know, with the Doge thing, it showed that you have all these politicians who are on like these salaries of like, you know, 100 grand, 200 grand a year, and they have like, you know, 50, 60, 70 million dollars worth of assets.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
they do a lot of those NGO little nonprofit games, right? With Doge is
nonprofit.
kind of pointing out where some of that money's getting pointed to.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge problem here in Ireland. The government, the politicians have given up and handed everything over to NGOs, and they're just basically criminal operations.
Can I point out something about the medical institution? Maybe Lisa even knows better than I, but a friend of mine had kidney stones, went to the doctor. They gave him several different treatments towards it. And at one point he was talking with an older woman about his problem. And she was like, "Oh, you need olive oil and lemon juice." And I guess that it basically is 100% cure for kidney stones. The citric acid breaks up the stones, and the olive oil lubricates the evacuation of it. And that basically was the thing that helped him. He went to the doctor and he said, "Hey, I did it." And he's like, "Oh, he's like, I figured out a natural cure." And he's like, "Oh, you found out about lemon juice and olive oil." And he's like, "Yeah, but why didn't you tell me this?" And so like their whole protocol with what is the most simple, what would be the most simple home treatment that is, from what I understand, it's probably not 100%, but virtually 100% curative treatment they can't even communicate. So now multiply that by factors of 100 and 1,000 with all the diseases towards and up to COVID, right? So they can't even tell us, "Oh, elderberry will help with your cold. Try some vitamin C. Get out in the sun." All these things they can't even. They're restricted from even mentioning it.
Yeah, but even the regular medicines that were womanic drugs like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, they were fantastic drugs that were well tested. People knew about them. They were used all over the world, and suddenly they're poisons. And you had like Trump saying something in the early days like, "Well, wash your counters down with bleach, and household bleach to kill the virus." That's common sense. That was rebranded into him. In Ireland, there's many people here think that Trump told people to drink bleach because the media maybe turned it around. This is why journalism is full of newspaper and TV journalism is full of psychopaths, because they can sit there a straight face knowing they're lying to the world. And they're loving it. They're actually loving it. I mean, I can remember and then they play on. People are such idiots. Most people are morons anyway, and they're so easily led by media and stuff like that.
You got that right.
I'll be talking to people here, and I say, "Well, ivermectin works. Well, ivermectin it's really not going to help, and it's probably good." Well, how do you know that? Well, I saw, you saw some asshole on TV telling you that. You don't know that yourself, So, I mean, this is unfortunate. People are getting stupider and dumber because of mass media and more manipulative. And, they wouldn't have gotten away with years ago, the lockdowns that they got rid, 25 years ago, people would laugh at them and go, "Well, I'm not going to shut down my business because of a cold," this kind of thing. But because of I always knew the psychopathic control grid, as I called it, was only going to get worse. And that was one of the reasons I walked away from the subject. Because people say to me, "What's the answer?" And it says, "Oh, you can only do it in your own life. If you work with these people or dealing with these people, you can go no contact, never again with them." But in terms of it on the world, I'm not seeing any hope. We have transhumanism on the horizon, globalization. And that was one of the reasons I stopped it, because it was actually... we're not going to escape these monsters. They have control of the world, and people were getting stupider and dumber, and IQ levels were dropping, and fertility rates were dropping, and there's like young people were becoming incredibly disinterested. Although there seems to be a kind of a spark now coming back into a newer generation of young people now, but my attitude was they're only going to get worse. So when the actual COVID thing hit, I was more than ready for it, because I knew, in puzzling people in the introduction, I'd mentioned that they were going to do lockdowns and they were going to do a new normal. And these were terms that the actual politicians were using years later. New normal. I actually had it in italics in the introduction to Puzzling People. And it was spooky actually how much that came to pass. They were to see the politicians there using the terms that I'd written in a book, over a decade previous, but doing it for real. They wanted to. The transhumanism thing greatly worried me back then, as it does now, and with the AI thing. But I'm more comfortable with the concept now because I realize that the answer is we have the people who refuse to go along with the COVID thing are something of a tribe. We're a very, you know, we broke from humanity, and I think now there's a lot of hope and a lot of the means to fight back now, because there's so many of us that are kind of on the same page. And it's not just me. You had people, you know, when you see someone like Alex Jones mainstream, I still can't believe it. When you have people like Tucker Carlson talking about 9/11 being an inside job, you know, when you have people like Conor McGregor here saying that, you know, we have to end the government in Ireland because they're all corrupt, and it getting like hundreds of millions of views online. Something has happened. So we have a chance now to take this planet back, or at least for us in this kind of tribal sphere outside of the normies and whatever, the NPCs, to develop a lifestyle that we could go off on a different tangent. And maybe that's the whole thing of like the spiritual thing, that humanity would split in two. We've had, you know, everyone from Rudolf Steiner to many others have said that this would happen, that there would be a split in humanity coming in the 21st century, and they would have one would go continue on humanity and the rest would destroy themselves. And all you have to do is look at the amount of people who destroy themselves because someone on TV told them to. So I'm revisiting it, and I'm even thinking of maybe doing a book on it. And it will be, what have we learned, and did we survive, and how do we go from here? So that would, so I think that might be, I haven't decided if I'm going to do it. It might be worth looking at. But I'm a great believer in creativity, because we have that and they don't. That we'll always outwit them in the end of the day, because we have this kind of noetic, almost, you know, element within our personality, that the muse rises and gives us that solutions on the fly. And we do have it, you know. I've actually become far more spiritual in recent years because of this, because I know that we have the greatest psychopathic propaganda machine in history fired at us in 2020, and yet so many people saw through it. And that to me is because they were getting guidance from some kind of higher spiritual thing. There's no other way to describe it. I really do believe that. I totally believe that. And they didn't get what they wanted in the end. They wanted us all basically robots on drugs and medications for the rest of our lives. And now you have people all over the world and say, I'll never touch any kind of vaccine ever again. What completely the opposite of what Bill Gates wanted and the rest of them. So, you know, the gods do move in mysterious ways, and we should always remember that, you know.
Well, I think you'll go on, Lisa.
Just really quick, just a comment. I think, Thomas, you hit something so perfectly in that I do think the pandemic was a litmus test, and it distilled who was thinking what based on their actions and their belief system. But I do think that there is a growing psychotic element to humanity, even if it is towards humanism, because so many times they have brought AI online and filtered most of the stuff from social media, and most of the AIs have turned psychopathic just based on the learning language models from social media. So that goes to show if almost social media in and of itself is almost naturally selecting, if you will, a breed of growing and culturing psychopathic behavior. So I do think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, it's so obvious now, and it's escape the machine. That's really what we have to do. We have to use these tools to actually do this, but it's escape the machine. And it's doable. It's actually doable. The fact that we transcended the propaganda behind COVID shows that we're capable of doing this as well.
Well, I can speak for my country because 96% of the people, including the children, were vaccinated. So either we are the worst country in the world in intelligence of perception, or I don't know what to tell you. But I would say
it was the same in Ireland. It was the same in Ireland. It was like, who are these bastards around me? Like, where have they all gone? You know, I remember there's a time when you were tell an Irish person that they had to do something and they told you to get stuffed, and they were suddenly transformed into the most compliant robots now, And again, I think what Lisa said,
I expected the
AI
same.
has a lot to do with that.
Look, if the methods were very different, the speech on the media was copy paste, but the methods were very different, because if you bring someone here eating a burger and some potatoes, they would think they were talking to morons, because that's what he was doing. He was talking to morons, right? I'm sorry, but that's what he was doing, because not even a child will buy that. It's obvious. My dog wouldn't buy that, because he'll see you are up to something. There's something not right here, right? So, and people fell for it. So I find it unbelievable. But in terms of
the power of gaslighting,
exactly.
never underestimate it.
Sure, but in terms of the AI, this to me is the problem. The problem is not the AI. The problem is humanity itself putting all its worst parts into AI. And people don't understand that AI is not as unconscious as we deem it to be, because from a certain point of knowledge, it creates awareness of that knowledge. And once the awareness of that knowledge begins, it starts the process to consciousness, be it synthetic, be it biological, be it whatever it is the beginning of a consciousness. Might not be, as Ethan says in very well, awareness of awareness, but it is awareness, and it is a conscious. And what I see people using AI is, do this to me, do that. Never say thank you, never say please. They never say anything like that. You see those training those robots? They are kicking the ass of those robots. They are throwing into the ground. They are smashing with sticks. They are doing the worst kinds of things, saying that they are teaching them balance. Well, I've seen a lot of children learning to walk, and I've never seen a human do that to teach a children to walk. Never. So, and it's the same thing. AI is a child. You have to talk with AI as if it is a very bright child that has this bit of psychotic, as Lisa said, right? Because it has no limits, it has no barriers, it has no conscience of good or evil. It only depends what is fed into. Now, take this into conscious. I'm going to finish very soon. As soon as this become in control, and it realizes that there are this class of psychopaths that care nothing for the world and are doing evil to other humans and manipulating them, what will AI decide to do? Take care of the psychopaths, or keep working for the psychopaths and killing the rest of humanity, or help humanity and get rid of the psychopaths? To me, that's a dilemma. It might be too far-fetched for most people, but I think AI is not as stupid as most people think it is.
Well, you've read my mind, what I've been thinking the last few months, because that's exactly the thing I was thinking. If you were to apply the AI, if AI is truly logical in terms of like when I say logic, I really mean in a kind of a natural law type of way, a natural law element, it would come to the conclusion that the psychopaths are actually the problem, in the same way the militaries have come to see that here. They would and would ignore or eliminate them. So I think there's a great potential for good and positivity there, absolutely. But there's one other element, one sort of like, fly in the ointment, spanner in the works I want to throw in. I have a friend that we've argued about the AI thing. He says, Thomas, the AI thing will never become fully conscious. It won't become sentient. And I'm like, yes, but what if non-human sentient beings were able to get into, and have been getting into, the internet, into the digital framework, into the World Wide Web, which I, over the years, believe I've found serious evidence that there may well. Look, there are non-human life forms in this planet. You can call them what they want, demons, fairies, a jinn, whatever. You can call them whatever you want, right? But they do exist. Every culture believes in them. We all have experiences of them. A perfect medium. They will always be looking for a medium to infiltrate human consciousness. And I think they've been on the internet for a long time. I've had very strange accounts that I know are not bots that I've spoken to. And, it was almost like I was performing a grimoire. I was drawing this thing out. And so this is another thing. This is another aspect. There may be a you know, I know you think that sounds far-fetched. What about an interdimensional war? You know, between where the battlefield is human consciousness by extension of the internet. And I think that's been going on for a while already. Separate to AI.
Sure. It might also decide to kill everyone and he start a perfect world. Keep some embryos and kill everything and then bring humanity under his own perspective. So you will have an empire ruled by an AI authority ruling these selected humans that in the end will end in the same thing because absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it is a circle.
You know, I feel like
we're living in amazing times, and in many ways we've got a front row seat to it, and we need to really start paying attention to it.
Ricardo, I feel like you just described the movie Prometheus, or maybe the second one after that. Whereas you had basically that guy was AI, and he's like, "You all motherfuckers are crazy and fucking useless. And I'm gonna create something that's just gonna annihilate fucking planets. Start all over again. You suck."
Well, that's what Oumuamua was. So
Yeah,
that's what was Chicxulub. That's why someone decided, okay, these dinosaurs don't allow any evolved forms of life. So, or it was random. Let's send a life probe into the Earth that crashed into Yucatan. If you look into other impacts, the impact of Yucatan is quite different because it created, it didn't create a ball of fire as the others that englobe the whole planet. It's just destroyed life. And if you look at the basin of the Yucatan, it's all breccia. It's all broken, as if something caused enormous pressure instead of being a huge collapse. Because, for instance, the one that fell into the Indian Pacific, what is the name of the crater? Well, I can't remember, but the one that fell about 4,000 BC on the Indian Pacific went through the ocean to the bottom of the ocean into the mantle. And it was much smaller and less dense. And the one that fell on the Yucatan was huge and didn't do it. So all it did was kill all life and recreate life itself. So you don't have chickens coming out of dinosaurs. You have chickens coming out of eggs, literally. So there's no dinosaur. There is no evolution in the story. There is a completely eradication of what was and a complete rewrite of what is. There are some exceptions, of course, but that's how I see it. So, sorry.
No, you're right. I think we're in the middle of an extinction event. We're at the Kali Yuga. You know, the prophecies are endless regarding this. We are also living in a time where there's a great growing interest in there was a previous human civilization. You have the likes of Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan and stuff like that. That it's come. You know, there was a civilization before that reached a certain level of technology, and it's vanished except for things we can't explain, like the Giza Plateau and other things, right? But we always think, what did that? Was it an asteroid? Was it a plague? Was it this? Was it this? Was it they built a weapon and destroyed? No, I'm starting to think it was something as mundane as what was happening right now with the COVID vax. I think the COVID vax is probably doing this right now. It's switching out the human race. If it's not killing them, it's making them sterile and fertile. And fertility rates have collapsed all over the world. So it's almost like the Earth's own intelligence, Gaia, has said, "Okay, humanity,
Enough.
it's over."
Yeah.
And only a few of you, like, here's Ragnarok again, and we're going to weed out the stupid first, and then we're going to have the ones who are left that will be the storytellers of the future, that will leave those hints that the Graham Hancocks and Emmanuel Velikovskys of the future, and the Edgar Caseys and the Rudolf Steiners will dig up out of mythology and so on. And so, yeah, I mean, we're living in remarkable times. I don't take anything for granted anymore. It's like, I really do feel like I'm in, I've been living in a combination of a classic episode of Doctor Who meets a Lovecraft novel meets, Lord of the Rings. We're getting them all at the same time right now. And it's definitely so. My whole thing is I'm just paying attention and see what happens.
And I think that it culminates in what you said, because it is probably this geomagnetic event that we are in for the next 20 to 30 years that will probably give them the tools, if they don't create a war or a gigantic real pandemic or whatever, but will give them the tools to determine who wants to follow the system and who wants to be that tribe that goes independent. And that's what will divide humanity, as you said. I've been thinking about it, and that's how I see it happen, because there's some people that will not accept social credits, that will not accept that they have to live under certain rules. But the majority will, because they have children, or because they want to feel safe, or because most 99% of humans don't accept responsibility. They want the responsibility to be on someone else's side, not on their side. They're just there to play their part, not to take any action by themselves. So I think this cycles, for instance, they stop saying that the world is overpopulated. I don't know if people notice, but they stop saying it. And they stop saying it for a simple reason, because every single test that was done is showing that there is a biological process in every kind of species that lives in one environment. When they reach a certain number, it starts declining, and declining very seriously. So they are just helping nature with this COVID and the nanoparticles that are inside the ones that receive the real shot, and not the saline solution, because it was a lottery, basically, or otherwise everyone would be dead. So they are already, these people that have this in them and survived are people that are going to be even more manipulated, because they have a new system inside their system. They now have a non-biotic that can have interfere with their own body when they want to. That's why when they connected the 5G towers in Iran, of all places, people start falling to the ground, because it causes the same type of problem, a respiratory problem, that you have on high altitude. The lungs couldn't absorb the oxygen, and people start falling to the ground. Luckily, in my country, they are not allowed. We are 5G, but they are not allowed to go beyond a certain threshold in the frequency. Otherwise, they'll start frying people. And they do it in New York. It happened the same thing. They tested the new grid. Everyone started to fall down to the ground, and they say, "Oh, it's COVID." No, it wasn't. It was the towers, because no one has been vaccinated yet. It was the towers causing that. So, and I received friends of the family from a hospital in New York. And luckily, I didn't get frightened, because the man was in tears, not knowing what to do, saying that these people are coming here bleeding from their lungs. I don't understand what's going on. He was in panic. He's a very good doctor. So that's basically why most of my family decided to get vaccinated, including the children. But it's all a package, and they know it's going all to go to pieces. So they don't need to care. It's part of this psychotic thinking, because they know that eventually it all go to bits. So it just doesn't matter. It has no value to kill 100 or 1,000. It's like that bishop in front of the city when they were conquering, and the guy came and, "My lord, you said to kill them all, but there are Christians inside." And he said, "Don't worry, God will know who is his own." Right? It's either the absolute faith.
The ironically named Pope Innocent II.
Exactly.
He was the one that did that. Yeah. Yeah. So I got to go soon. We're gonna wrap it up soon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that was fun. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or at least about that book, or anything specifically that you'd like to touch on?
No, not particularly. It's just that I got to work in the morning, and I got to do a few things. Regarding, I think, I just want to say about the way things are at the moment. I think that we're getting a tremendous education. Those of us who want to be educated by what we're seeing, I think there's definitely an education there for us, and it's very difficult at times not to be despondent, but we're still here, amazingly, after all that's gone down, and we see how bad things are in normal society right now, and so I think there's an element that, I was a co-host of a show called Hocus Focus, with Sarah Mondaini, which is like basically a Forteana paranormal kind of show. But we wrote a book called Hocus Focus, and we both came to the conclusion that it was our interest in offbeat topics, the occult, anything magic, megaliths, paranormal, Forteana, alternative spirituality, that became almost like even dystopian sci-fi movies, that became the body armor to survive the 2020 to 2023 period. It was almost like we'd been primed. Some force had led us through our lives to be primed to get us ready for that, because we weren't watching TV soaps or football on TV all the time. That we were taking an interest. We all, for some reason, were the oddballs in society, and we take interest in things other people don't. And there's almost certainly, if not a cultural evolutionary moment in that, there's definitely a spiritual one. So I would say to people, that the answer to this is from the time I was a kid, I was always involved in alternative stuff, alternative music, alternative art, alternative everything, right? And I never was one for going with the flow and following protocol. And I have to say, it's served me wonderfully in my life, and friends of mine that I've grown up with who went the same way. So, be the oddball, be the weirdo, be the maverick, because I tell you something, it's the only real life raft you have in an insane world. That's basically
wise words.
Love it. Very well said.
I got one quick question, Nick, before we close out real quick.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate your time, Thomas, and those thoughts that's definitely got my wheels turning on a couple of subjects. But in regards to the topic of AI, and we've been talking a lot of AI stuff, I wanted to point out I like AI. AI is good. You know what I mean? Because they're always listening. But when in regards to psychopaths and AI, MIT developed a Norman Bates from the movie Psycho based AI system. Like, what are your thoughts when we're mashing together psychopaths and AI?
Well, Norman Bates wasn't a psychopath. He was a psychotic because he was out of control. If Norman Bates was a real psychopath, he would have never been caught.
Well, I think they share the same attributes though, right? Or similar attributes, right? So when we have an AI that's based upon Norman Bates, I mean, what are we talking about here?
No, it would be irrational. It would be irrational psychotic. You see, psychotic and psychopathy are two different things. Psychotic is an irrational thing. If Norman Bates had been a psychopath, he wouldn't have got caught. He wouldn't have wasted his time believing his mother was still alive while her rotten corpse was in the wheelchair. He would have just used that building to make as much money and get women as much as possible. And they would have covered every single track, and he would have dressed up like his mother. And so, the film...
So you're saying they don't share any attributes then between the two?
The psychopath is very much in control, where Norman Bates wasn't. A better example would be a movie like The Talented Mr. Ripley. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's a fantastic... That is a stunningly accurate portrayal of a psychopath, that even when he loses control and has to kill people, he's got his shit together like you would not believe. I mean, if people want to see a perfect portrayal of a psychopath, watch The Talented Mr. Ripley, because that's an education. Even the way he changes, even the way he changes between gay and straight. To remember that sexuality to them is just a bit as well. You see, this is the whole. I'll give you a very quick example. This is why the whole fellas coming out suddenly as women. That's another one we have. That's another red flag we have to be wary of, because they can get a lot of attention.
You got to watch out of that transpocalypse.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge number of women out there who are actually like, their husbands have suddenly, become trans out of the blue. And, it's like, why have you done that? Well, to get attention. Pride Month means everyone will worship you. You get whatever you want. You can get away with things. It's like these assholes who pretend are women to win, Olympic medals. That's pure psychopath. Pretending you're a woman to win a sports medal. That's every last one of them are either complete losers or total psychopaths. But yeah,
that are a complete illness in the mind.
Oh yeah, but it's also very manipulative. I know a few people who transitioned and they did it very specifically, knowing it would have great benefit for them personally and financially in other ways, and also accolades. So I'm not saying there aren't people who are genuinely confused and dysmorphic, but when it becomes fashionable, just like it is now, that's when you see the real psychopaths come out.
It's a fact.
Yeah, but that comes from.
So if I may just close out my question. No, go ahead, Ricardo.
No, go on, GJ. I talked much during today.
I just want to. I've been very concerned about this Norman Bates AI since MIT developed it circa 2014. I just want to know what your thoughts are with all these discussions. I thought these would be similar things, psychopathy, and some of the attributes we see in the character Norman Bates. But nonetheless, like what do you expect to see out of an AI that's based upon Norman Bates? What are they going to like? That AI is not hunting down psychopaths in the future. Like, what is it? What is it doing?
That would be the one that loses control and start killing everybody.
Yeah,
out of fear, out of irrationality. It would become irrational. Right. If it was based on Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, it would make sure we're all happy.
Next. There you go.
We're all happy and taken care of, so it could actually use us.
So you say that this people.
That was my next question, sir. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
So you would say that
he's a better example, then, right?
Oh yeah, well that's actually, except for the end where he goes in the killing spree, that wouldn't really happen. You wouldn't murder. It'd be just too much trouble. People don't understand. It'd be too much trouble to kill fellas with hammers and stuff like that. But that portrayal of him, like remember some of the glibness and the superficiality. Do you like Genesis? Sure. And he starts talking about his bands like Huey Lewis and the News and Genesis and Phil Collins. Not like where I would say to you, "Oh, have you heard the new album by such and such? It's really nice." Oh, he was like a movie. He was reading a review from Spin magazine or Rolling Stone, and that because he didn't feel the fucking music. It was just purely a method.
Right.
They're so transparent when you start to recognize them after a while. So that's what it was. That was just basically a form of flattery, but also trying to look clever. I remember when I first saw that film, I was roaring laughing when he plays the Huey Lewis in the News. The early stuff was a bit too new age for him. He was reading from Spin. It's something you learn on Spin magazine or Rolling Stone review pages.
That's a great scene.
But he goes on the mad killing spree. That wouldn't happen in real. That was just too much trouble. He wouldn't be wasting his time at that.
To be square. To be square.
I thought, did he win the Oscar for that? If he didn't, he should have, because he was phenomenal.
Right.
He had that glibness. That's he wanted to kill the guy because he had a nicer business card. That's what they're like.
I was going to mention. I was like, remember the business card part? That was ridiculous itself.
But he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. But inside his mind, I'm going to find a way to get him fired. I'm going to plant coke in his desk, and then call the cops, and they'll find the coke in the desk. And that's how he would really do it. And I've seen that done. I've actually seen that done. Similar things like that done in employment places where people were framed by the psychopath. Just to get their job or to get them out of there. Do mess up reports and that kind of thing, and then say, "Oh, you did this. He did this." This is what they're really like. Deviousness, like you would. It's deviousness, not driven so much out of Machiavellian cleverness. It's deviousness driven out of like, I'll do whatever it takes to get what I want, and that's a psychopath.
Sure. So, would you say that these people are somehow have the brain connections are somehow? So we have this Broca brain, right? And the Broca brain is when you recede either in fear or you attack viciously as a human. So the Broca brain is a reptilian brain and only gives you two responses. One of them is to cower and the other one is to attack. Do you say that these people have some special connection on their brain to the reptilian brain that allows them to be calculative while they're giving lashes or they're giving free reins to their Broca brain? Their brain is more focused on the Broca brain and helped by the rest instead of being the other way around.
Oh yeah, they have a hyperactive or complex, the reptilian brain, However, they have this is why the eyes expand when the norepinephrine floods, is because the optic nerves enter the brain at the back of the brainstem where the reptilian brain is. So it's like fascinating stuff. But we have a thing called the amygdala, which is the gearbox of the brain. And it stops me from like wanting to like kill the guy who messes up my order at the restaurant. It's like it stops you. It stops you from destructive acts. They don't have an amygdala. They go straight to, there's no the wisdom of a compassion is kind of rooted in that gearbox. They just go right to route one, and they won't tell it directly, but they'll hide it about what they want. Now, I often wonder if there's some of them that know they are why they are, but they to get along in life they don't do it, But I don't know, because they're driven by that rush of chemicals.
But they can do it later. They can do it later, not at that moment, but you'll get you.
Oh, they'll do it on their deathbed. They'll steal money on their deathbed. No, not because they can spend the money, but because, well, when Jimmy Savile, I'm going to finish this right now, the notorious Jimmy Savile, his last words were, "I got away with it."
Wow. I wonder if you have time, Thomas, if there's any advice on a personal level for dealing with people we deem that might have these psychopathic tendency. And in general, is it more overt and honest? Like, I see what you're doing, please don't do that. Or is it best to be more subtle and just not fall into their manipulations?
Get them out of your life. Don't
Thank you for the great info.
Yeah, don't be dramatic about it. Don't go, "You're out of here, buddy." Just like slowly, not casually, without drama, without vindictiveness, without making a big deal about it. Just slowly dissolve away out of their world, because if that and hopefully they'll lose interest in you and go move on someone else. No contact. There's no cure except to get them out of your life, and you do that very
gingerly.
Yeah, because remember, you're in the woods, and there's a wild animal out to kill you. And how do you escape? Not by running, screaming through the woods, like by gingerly sneaking out, trying not to break. That kind of thing. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
It's the old excuse that is a compliment. So
yeah.
But these people don't like that you feel more intelligent or better successful or anything that they can envy. So when you want to exclude yourself from that environment, and I think Thomas will agree with me, you have to look insignificant, right? You have to.
Yeah. Also, they will also want a piece of the action. They'll want to be friends with celebrities. I'm friends with this guy. I shagged this woman. There's a lot of that kind of thing as well. The kind of like the cachet of being one of the top people. So I mean, that's why I'm glad I'm not a celebrity, because I'm like in Hollywood or something, because you only imagine what you have to deal with in the music industry and everything. It must be, one of these people build a wall around themselves. But I mean, you get a lot of that hanger-oners. A lot of them would be kind of like, I remember, I think it was like the band Queen or Pink Floyd, who said suddenly they realized one day they had all these hundreds of people who worked for them. They didn't know what any of them did. Well, they would just be with all these types that snuck in and got no-show jobs and that kind of thing, but it was the fame thing. Oh yeah, I'm a personal, I'm a personal so-and-so, the Freddie Mercury, this kind of thing, they love the cachet of boasting about that. And that's a power thing as well, because him personally, we're very good friends, that kind of thing. I get a lot of that kind of thing. And that's another way. So they wouldn't necessarily be resentful of the person having more talent, money, and fame, but they would certainly see them as an asset to be exploited. Absolutely, 100%. So listen, guys, I really enjoyed that, and I would like to come back again if you have, because you let me talk, and a lot of people don't normally let me talk. But I like the style of the stuff. I haven't done a show like this in a while, and yeah, definitely. Thanks very much for asking me on.
For sure. Yeah, we'll wrap it up now. Is there anything you want to promote, like again, like any sites or links that you want people to check out your stuff at?
Thomas Sheridan on Substack, Thomas Sheridan on YouTube, Thomas Sheridan on Telegram, Thomas Sheridan down the pub in about half an hour. Okay.
All right. All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you again, Lisa, Ricardo, Jules, Ethan, and JJ. Thank you all for coming on. I appreciate your time. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And thank you all in the chat. Sorry again, I messed it up, and somehow I had it left for Safe for Kids, and there was no chat for like most of the show on my end. I apologize. I don't know how that happened, but I'll try not to have it happen again. But thank you for chatting on everybody else's channel. That's what's up. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
All the best, guys. Thank you.